From all the discussions I have with executives in retail, in manufacturing, everything comes back at the end to efficient, sustainable growth. Consumer reactions are changing. Yes, the cost of living pressures are very much there, and there's intense cost and price activity. But also within those changing expectations for consumers are changing expectations towards sustainability and long-term impact of products that people buy on the planet, on other people, and their surroundings.
For example, in the case of finding solutions to productive growth and efficient growth, we need to clearly specify what we expect from the business standpoint, so we translate it in that way to the people that will deliver for us.
The area that always comes to mind for me is promotional or advertising mechanics, and the approach maybe of the last decade of spray and pray, as I sometimes call it, without understanding what the results or the costs, a cost-benefit analysis of promotions or advertising is well gone.
When we think about efficiency, we normally think about faster use of machinery. We think about people like, supply chain people. And efficiency is not necessarily in this context of a new way to do business. It's not necessarily speedier machines. So efficiency and growth should not be in conflict, quite frankly. It should be in synchrony. But to me, efficient growth is one that leverages the ability to realize potential revenue coming from our products, understanding assortments, understanding profitability, et cetera, et cetera. It's a world where data help us to identify the opportunities to grow, and we enable that growth by understanding those and enabling the activity system that is required for it.
It's really about meeting consumer needs more efficiently. And I think we've got some great examples over the last few years, particularly in terms of omnichannel, how consumer needs, how consumer expectations have changed, how we get products to market, how we get products into consumers' homes more efficiently, and how we communicate with them. You look in the apparel industry, for example, and all the initiatives towards buying less, but buying better and buying more efficiently. But organizations need data in order to do that. They not just need data, we all have too much data, but most of us have too little analysis.
Lacking or not lacking data, we do have examples in the industry where we have leveraged opportunities to really drive growth in an efficient way. I hate to talk about this in the context of a crisis, but when COVID hit us, we were basically with the pants down to COVID in general as a businesses approaches, sales approach, distribution approach, manufacturing approach. And I saw some companies growing in that period, in spite of the lack of supply of materials or all the interruptions we had, people not going to plants in general. Why those companies were able to grow? And I think it's because they took an approach of efficient growth mentality, where they analyzed their assortment based on the data they had, the demands, needs, and they reassorted the business to those SKUs that were really the ones that could leverage throughput, higher throughput, and meet the needs of the consumer at that very moment. I saw that in the CPG industry, in several players that did that, and they grew. They got the higher margin, and they were there present with a limited assortment, but the assortment that matters the most. But imagine if we can do that ongoing, not necessarily on a crisis moment, but ongoing. We will be making better decisions at the board level.
We see growth coming from many companies who are bold and innovative with their portfolios. Their portfolios of product, but also of routes to market. Now, the most immediate one that sees is you need flexible manufacturing, you need responsive manufacturing. But for me, the more important thing is you actually need a responsive and flexible supply base. And that comes from not just the first tier supplier, but about the second tier supplier, the third tier supplier, and the fourth tier supplier. And it's about having the systems and processes for all of those tiers in the supply chain, the total supply base, to see the demand and be able to respond to meeting it. And it's a proper collaborative supply chain. And it's about having systems and transparency across that supply chain, not just across one or two tiers, if you're going to be able to meet it, and importantly, with less waste.
I have seen amazing supply chain management capabilities that then cannot be leveraged because manufacturing is not flexible enough. This is a very important thing because historically manufacturing was like everything for us in this area of operation. And we elevated the game of warehousing, logistics, planning. And now, today, we need to understand that planning is the heart of how these things happen, or the brain of orchestrating these operations. And if we don't have manufacturing at parity on capabilities and able to manage the changes on the environment, we're losing the game already because we only have the around manufacturing, but we don't have the core of how to transform materials into products that will be delivered by that very capable logistics and distribution system. The way to generate the most important aspect of this thing, which is the trust. If we trust the changes are valid, if we trust the data is correct.
One of the other important themes for me of that collaboration that I talked about earlier, up and down the supply base, but also sharing data and information, for me, it actually starts in the innovation process. Because if you don't involve the suppliers in that innovation process, then you're not going to be able to do it efficiently. We see lots of developments today, platforming as an example of where you're able to be efficient with the introduction of new products, or even with omnichannel, of recognizing that you're going to have several different formats from the beginning of a product. But the great key to me is seeing that end-to-end supply chain, collaborating with suppliers, being transparent with suppliers up and down, and sharing data and having the processes and systems to do it. It doesn't start from the moment you launch the product. It starts from the moment you have the idea.
It could be that you reserve capacity for development of new ideas to go to market.
Yeah, you touched on that. For me, what is the very old concept of in-source or outsource? To me, today, it's a network. It's a network organization. You'll have some parts in-house, some parts out of house for a period of time, and you'll change. Yeah. You'll have maybe some formats in-house, but you have to have a network. It's not a simple supply and demand equation to meet a consumer demand. But again, to manage a network is very different requirements in terms of systems and data to managing an old adversarial buy-sell relationship. And I saw through the COVID experience how much more can be achieved efficiently if everybody in the supply chain, retailers and manufacturers, collaborate together. We saw typically that some SKUs were very, very inefficient. You share that data, you talk about it, you don't just exchange data. And that collaboration is really the key to meeting efficient consumer needs in that modern world of omnichannel and very, very fast moving consumer trends.
The financial aspect of right costing our products is always been a challenge. And I think this challenge started even when we started with mass production. Whatever variable we put in the mass production system, we don't know how to separate the cost for each one of the items we produce there. And that's been a challenge all along. And it becomes even more of a challenge today because of the proliferation of offerings that we are asked to do because consumer changes and trends in the marketplace and competitive moves or the size of the pack that is required for a given market. So we continue having the same challenge. And I think the solution is that we need a financial system that costs a load the activities based on effortization or based on different alternative models. It cannot be just a straight division of the total cost into number of items. That doesn't work anymore. We are normally good at estimating those when it comes to justifying the new product because we understand our operations good enough to have good sound assumptions. The problem is the costing allocation on an ongoing basis because the financial system is not necessarily fit for use on that type of situation. And there is a lot of work going on changing those and bringing more and more of those capabilities to play. I'm not sure they are at the right place. So we might be losing opportunities today for the right revenue growth activities, the right profitability, and this is simply very much required for efficient growth.
As you say, those old issues of cost allocation have been around since mass production began. But for me, the advent of omnichannel and the complex supply chains of route to markets has changed it from being about manufacturing cost to being about total delivered cost. And when you start looking at total delivered cost, then you do need more data, more systems to be able to balance higher cost in one part of the value chain to lower cost in another, or indeed higher profitability in one particular distribution channel to another. And that's what's really changed. The other thing that also is that I don't think it can any longer be the preserve of just the accountants and the financial people. It's also about the visualization of data. That dashboard that we talked about of all important decision makers sharing the same data, sharing the same view of data and being able to make decisions based upon it. The other point to also take a forward-looking view, and many organizations are now getting into it, is that we have to be able to measure not just the financial cost of different supply or different delivery options, but we need to be able to measure the environmental cost, the carbon cost. Is the carbon cost of this particular supply arrangement bigger than the carbon cost of another one? So it isn't just the financial cost anymore, it's the carbon cost as well.
The planning office has evolved to be the center of the heart of the operation. And that wasn't the case before, or we didn't give to it that importance.
It's so critical. I have a saying which I think sometimes brings it home to people, that COVID and the supply chain disruption of the first years of this decade has moved supply chain from the engine room to the bridge. It always was the engine room all the way through our time, but it was very much behind the scenes. Now, at the C-suite, it is central there. And CFOs, CEOs who've been through those last few years now understand that properly. It was put to me in a couple of boards that even the agendas have changed. Supply chain used to be the last, even supply chain was on the board, it used to be one of the last items. And the first years of this decade put the supply chain items, the ability to supply, where are our supply issues, where are our potential supply issues, it put it to the front of the board agenda.
Yeah.
And that's how much things have changed, but that's how much we also have to change mindsets, mentalities, language, and indeed the systems and data that provide it behind it as well.